All right, today we're working on Beth, and we are going to take a very detailed approach in terms of not only learning the specifics of the chords and the melodic phrases within, but to actually understand from a chordal perspective, like from a harmonic perspective, the relationship between these notes. And this is always my preference over just having a student just mimic what they're seeing on the keyboard, because I want them to understand what is actually happening. And you'll be able to use that in other things, which makes it a whole lot more productive use of time. In fact, at that point, the song is not even that significant. It's more about what the song teaches you. So, but we're using Beth, and we're going to start by just identifying the key that the song is in, right? We're in the key of C. All right, so, and now let's talk about the chord progression. We have a C, which is the 1 chord, and then we have F, which is a 4 chord, and then we have G, which is a 5 chord. Which is really funny because when you think of 1-4-5 as sort of like blues, and then to hear 1-4-5 in a different kind of context, this song does not sound bluesy at all, or other kinds of songs that are 1-4-5, you know, a lot of times are kind of rock, like quicker tempoed songs. But anyway, this is nice and slow, and it definitely frames that 1-4-5 thing in a different way. So the very first move is a C chord up and around the C5 area. All right, so it's a root position chord. Root position, 1, 3, 5. And he kind of rolls into the chord. And then there's an arpeggio that takes place that it's going to include the G below the C. So now we're kind of like second inversion area now. Again, I'll explain what that means. Root position, first position, second inversion. Root position, first inversion, second inversion. And then if you're at root position up here, as you know, when you come down, you go directly into second inversion. Now, even though they're still going to have this G on top, this G is still going to be on top. We still consider this second inversion because it's more, the identifying factor is more about what the bottom note is in the chord. So we're definitely a second inversion territory, but we're gonna include this G on top. So again, we have, or you could roll from the G if your hand could do it, but it's so quick, it's a little bit insignificant, so you don't have to spend too much time on trying to perfect that. So either way, it's either or, whatever you feel you can handle. Let's add a bass note. Let's add C bass note. This is C4, middle C, C5. We're going to do the bass note at C3. Let's try to pump quarter notes too. Now this is a highly syncopated rhythm, which means that a lot of the notes are going to fall on the up. These are your quarter notes. 1, 2, 3. But the interesting thing is that there is a constant 16th note kind of underlying pulse in this. 1E and the 2E and the 3E and the 4E and the... So a lot of the melodic things that you're going to be doing are going to fall on the up beat. So you have to be aware of that, which could sometimes cause a coordination issue between your left and your right hand. So we have... Now the next move is a C suspended fourth. So the third is omitted, which is why it's a sus chord or a suspended chord. Then it goes back to straight chord, straight triad. Then it's a sus2. Same principle, the third is being eliminated. And then it just ends on a 5 chord. See, the 5 chord means that it's just the root and the fifth, as opposed to the full triad, which is root third and fifth. Now, to really articulate it correctly, we're going to eliminate the root from that whole phrase. I wanted to show it to you with the root so you understand that we're still in the 1 chord. We're still in the C chord. So sometimes when you do parts of chords like this, you're no longer relating it to the chord progression because you have a broken chord. But I want you to understand that it's still the C chord. Okay, so now let's do a little bit of an isolation and drill. We're going to do this. Again. Make sure you're using your sustain pedal. Okay, now all of that was just one measure of the song. So we're going to move into the second measure now, and it goes to the 4 chord. But this is camouflaged because he still keeps the C bass note. So it sounds like it's staying on the 1 chord. And even if you look at what he's doing with his right hand, it resembles a C chord more than it resembles the 4 chord, which is the F chord. But you still have to understand what's going on in the progression so you know where you are. And I'll prove it to you right now. If I were to hum the intro and play the chords, listen to what happens if I stay on the 1 chord. Ba ba da 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 ba ba ba. It doesn't sound right, but this does. Da 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 ba da ba da da. Right, so it's the 4 chord. All right, so hidden though. So here's our move. We have this chord, which is an F sus2, but it's a second inversion. Doesn't this look more like a C suspended 4th? But it's actually, in this context, it's an F second inversion sus2. So here's your root position F, here's first inversion, here's second inversion. Now, where's the third? The third's up here now. All right, so sometimes it's harder to see sus4s and sus2s when you're using an inverted chord because the third is in a new location. So here is your F second inversion, sus2. We take the third and we move it down here. Again, looks just like a C sus4 because it is. But in this context, we're going to call it F sus2, second inversion. What makes it even less like an F chord is that you're going to stay on the C bass. You're pedal pointing the C. You're pedal pointing the C. Let's talk about pedal pointing. In that previous move when we went... So that's a type of pedal pointing. You're keeping that C, I'm sorry, that G in the phrase the whole time. That's a type of pedal pointing. I guess a more common use, or when you hear the term pedal pointing, more commonly it's referring to keeping the same bass note in a progression, which you hear a lot, right? So C, F over C, G over C, right? But that's a type of pedal pointing. It's just keeping that same note on the bottom. So while the camera just shut off. So while we are doing this pedal pointing up top here, I want to also point out to you that the bass note is pedal pointing through this entire intro. And the fact that this chord that I just showed you, the F sus2, second inversion, is over C, it absolutely makes it still seem more like a C chord than an F chord, but you must understand the context. So now if we put those first 2 measures together, or at least the first measure and a half together, this is what it's going to sound like. Sorry, here we go. Again. All right, so right before he goes into the F sus2, he does this little A note by itself on the one and da of 4, 1 E and a 2 E and da. Wait, 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and da, and then into the 1 of the next measure. So that sounds like this. Right? So of 4, and then the 1 of the next measure. So now your next drill, right? So you had the first measure was a drill. Our second drill is going to be the end of the first measure into the very first part of the second measure. So that drill is going to look like this. Again. Sorry. And just keep practicing that. And then the next part of this measure is going to be a series of dyads that just kind of climb the C scale in thirds. Remember, when you're talking about thirds in a scale, they're not going to be parallel thirds. They're not always going to be the space of a third. A lot of times it's going to be it's like a series of minor thirds and major thirds together. So an example, we generally would call these thirds, but because we're working within the C diatonic scale, then sometimes those thirds are closer together than others. So the first third, the G and the B, that's a major third. Do, re, mi, and then the next dyad, if you were to relate it to A, it would be a minor third. Do, re, mi would be the third, so this is the flatted third. But in the context of the C diatonic formula, these are just referred to as thirds. So if your fingers are just spaced, you can't make a mistake. Everything you're going to do is just going to be beautifully harmonious to the key of C. It's like just built-in cool little harmony. So anyway, sometimes you capitalize on that when you're doing a little bit of a phrase, and you may just move up the scale like this, which is what happens in the song. But it's all over a C pedal pointed bass note. So those staggered dyads, if you want to call it that, is a G and a B, and then an A and a C, a B and a D and a B, and then an F and a D. So now let's make the second measure by itself a bit of a drill. You're going to go like this. And we'll start from the of 4 of the previous measure so you can get some practice in with that. So it'll be like this. And then again. You can fill a little bit of space too. You may notice that I just kind of lightly hit that chord again, just to fill the space so it doesn't, because it could be awkward where you have this empty space like this. So, but if you do it like this. So now we're going to put the first 2 measures together. Here's what we have. And then just keep drilling that. Keep drilling that. The second half of the intro is very similar to the first half. You're going to repeat the first measure as you played it before. So you have... But here's where it gets different. So this could be, you consider this like first ending and second ending. It's a repeat, but it resolves differently. It ends differently. So this would be a very good use of first ending and second ending. So let's talk about what the second ending does. It's the same F chord that resembles the C chord. And you're going to phrase it like this. Now here's a little interesting bit of theory for you. So this is an F sus2, right? Second inversion we learned from before. But the A is back in there again. It's on the bottom. The phrase is... So now technically we can't call this a sus2 any chord anymore. We have to call it an add2 because we put the third back in. The third's back in there, but it's on the bottom. So we'll just call that F add 2, second inversion. I'm sorry, now I guess your first inversion. Well, it gets a little bit screwy when you have the 4-note chords, but anyway, so root position, first inversion, and then if you're playing the phrase up here, but then you're putting the A back on the bottom, so technically it really becomes first inversion, but it's add 2. I guess if we want to be super picky, we could say add 9. Just because we're putting the 2 all the way up there, but optional, you'll see it both ways on a piece of music. So now let's practice going from the first measure directly to the second ending. So we have... Try that again, sorry. That's another good opportunity for isolation and drill. So we'd have again. And then it finally resolves. But even the resolve chord, in this case the 5 chord, is going to have the C on the bottom. So it's just that C is pedal pointed the whole time. So that's your last chord. It's just a root position G over C. So it's this. Now we put the entire intro together, and here's what we have. Again. Sorry for that. Again. Occasionally, other than the obvious mistakes that I'm making, occasionally you'll see me kind of like fill a little bit of space, kind of honoring that underlying kind of 16th note pulse that's through the song. And sometimes it'll manifest itself in different ways. I'm going to have to look up a YouTube video as to how to not let my camera shut off. But anyway, so the idea here is that you'll identify a little bit of inconsistencies in what I'm doing. And that's really the beauty of playing this way, because by having an actual understanding of the chordal value and understanding kind of like the essence of how it was performed, the spirit in the playing, then you can recreate that and kind of make it feel like it's yours. Because one of the most, I think, stiffest recipes for stiffness, if you will, is when you're looking at a diagram, you're looking at, like for a guitar, tablature, or even musical notation, and the expectation is for you to read those notes exactly as they're written. Sure, that's what being a good reader is all about, and you can do that, and you can get really good at it, and it'd be very useful because you're an excellent reader. You could read anything that's put in front of you, but you don't always understand from an internal level of what was going on when this intro was written. I guarantee you that no one sat with pen and paper, that this was sitting at the piano and just kind of having an understanding of how these chords work together, and then just coming up with something that sounded beautiful like this. And then somewhere down the line, someone listened and transcribed it, and then people who bought those books for this song or sheet music would read it exactly as written, maybe not understanding some of the things that you learned today about the relationship and how these chords, it's still 1-4-5 progression, all those things. So if there's a little bit of inconsistency in your playing, know that that comes from a place within you. It's as if you were writing this intro, creating this intro, and you felt it a little differently each time. Anyway, that's it as far as we're going with this one today. And that's it. Take care.